Today we deal with trees in action, or trees in interaction, which is a nice subject. There isn't a book on this, sorry to say. Going back to Vogel's Life in Moving Fluids, he remarks on the remarkable mechanical properties of trees in winds, and how normally they wouldn't be uprooted, they would simply slide along on the root mass and stop, you know. But they trip over, so they get blown down. But almost nobody knows anything about trees. Quite often I have a forester in this class and they'll say, "Oh, I missed a bit on trees, I know about trees." And I said, "No, you know about wood. You don't know about trees." So what do you mean? I say, "Well, what do trees do with wind? Here comes a gale across the prairie, it hits the edge of a forest, you know, it'll send thousands of ships bowling across the ocean, yet 100 metres into the forest it's extinct. What do the trees do to the wind?" I'm buggered if I know, you know. I said, "Yeah, well, you know nothing about trees." There was a guy walking around an oak tree. He had a big pig, and every so often he'd lift this pig up and he'd pick some acorns and eat them, and he'd put it down. And there was a efficiency expert driving past in his car, and he couldn't stand this. And then after a while he got out of his car and went down the paddock and said, "I don't suppose you realise, my friend, that if you knock the acorns down you could save a huge amount of time." And the farmer looks at you in disgust and said, "That's the trouble with you bastards, you know nothing about pigs. They got no sense of time." You liked that, didn't you? I can tell you did. Put one good joke up. Well, here's a tree standing there, not doing too much, it seems. And about 40% of it's underground, and most of it's within, 30 centimetres of the soil, the underground bit, I mean. The rest of it's sticking out of the ground. And it's all the time, it's dropping leaf and sugars, really, and it's manufacturing sugar here out of solar energy and water and starches, and it's sending them down and it's extruding the sugars down there through the roots and bribing fungi to go and get minerals in exchange for sugar. There's a whole underground mining operation going on. And these fungi are speeding off and bringing back minerals to the tree, for which it swaps sugars. And there's a constant supply of sugars down, or minerals up. The cells on the outside, the light coloured cells, are the xylem. They carry materials in moisture, and the centre is a flow, which is the root matter, and in which this becomes the wood, the true wood, in which waste products are stored, and it's all closed down slowly into wood. And as Geoff has already pointed out, when a molecule gets here, it ends up out there, and it goes from outside to inside. It goes from the xylem which is out in the stem, is this in the root. So everything's going through each other and taking up a totally different relative position. The tree is an event which germinates right here. Sometimes, like in the American West, you can go along and you'll see a tree coming down and its roots coming out. And you can stand under it and you can barely touch where the thing germinated. It's so much soil is gone. It just blew away and left the tree sitting on its props there. Texas. I was talking to an old lady there one day. She sort of owns most of the Panhandle, and old lady Rockefeller. She made me a plate of scones, pretty good scones, and she said the trouble was when they put the fifth horse onto the ploughs. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, we couldn't plough with 4 horses. The roots were too tight in the prairie. So when they put the 5th horse on, the ploughs cut and turned up the prairie. It sounded like we'd undo thousands of zippers being undone. Oh, thanks, mate. And she said, and that was our mistake. She said, as soon as we got that grass turned over, the whole thing blew away, you know. The soil underneath blew away. She was a girl of 17. Not a dignified old lady with a good scone-making capacity. And she was staggering along picket fences trying to find her neighbour's gate because you couldn't see. There's just too much soil in the air. And that's what makes tough old rich ladies hanging on the picket fences. She'd make me scones, but she would not plant a single tree on this enormous property she owned. Okay, so as far as permaculture goes, I've trained 3 generations of Rockefellers. Her generation, her children's generation, and her grandchildren's generation. And I still haven't got a lot of trees in on their property. I think I'll give up training bugger them. Right, so that's your tree. Now, that tree has a lot of relationships with other trees of the same species. It has strong genetic exchanges, pollen, and with trees of totally different species, it can still exchange messages. So it's in communication, and not so much in the air, although quite a lot, but a lot at root level. So between trees in the forest, there's a lot of exchange going on at root level. And some are hosting root associates that are needed by others and so on. Fixing nitrogen. So there's a lot of pally stuff going on here, and up here, if this tree, for instance, is attacked by borers or leaf-eating beetles, it sends out a distress scent picked up by other species, other individuals of that species, who then produce anti-feeding chemicals in their leaves to repel those borers. And it happens pretty fast. So for some time I was in a pine forest looking at borers, and it's possible to pick up an axe, hit the trunk of a pine tree with the axe, make an injury, and sit there, and by evening there are thousands of longicorn beetles forming a sort of whirlpool above that tree because it's giving out a distress signal, I'm injured, and then slowly they come beating down the bark till they find the injury, and then they lay eggs in it, and by next morning thousands of little grubs are on their way into the pine. So it's very active signalling going on about the state of health of the tree. If you have a little tame tomato plant in a pot and you bend over and smell it, it doesn't smell much, but give it a cuff under the ear and it has a powerful smell immediately. It puffs out a, "What did you do that for?" signal. "Leave me alone, you bastard." It's that powerful tomato smell from the plant is in response to your hitting it. And some people say even if you talk about it roughly, it puffs a bit of a bad smell out. Here's a guy that writes about plants, a whole book about them. Yeah, Supernature. He said that if you threaten plants in absentia, people say to me, "Do you talk to your plants?" For some reason, most people take me to be a sort of vegetarian spiritualist. And I'm not. And do you talk to your plants? They say, I say, yeah, often. I say, mainly I'm telling them, I'll chop you down tomorrow, you little bastard, if you don't bud out a bit, you know. Mainly I threaten them. They understand threats. I'm not too sure they understand kindness. I talk to my plants all right. And I carry out my threats. Yeah, keep them in line. Worse than dogs they are. You got to straighten them up. So they're signalling each other and responding and making appropriate changes to their chemistry in response to incoming and outgoing signals. Right, that's nice, isn't it? But the interesting things start to happen when in comes the sun, beams down on the trees, or doesn't. And the trees do respond strongly to this. They start to grow and manufacture starches and sugars, and in fact they're all the needs for growth. Now, if the sun comes out of a pretty clear sky, no clouds, the tree and all other plants, trees and all other plants stop utilising light, and that's called light saturation. So that is the case of quite a lot of areas. The plants get light saturation. They can't take any more. Turn that damn sun off, you know. We can't keep on at this rate of energy use. So they give up. But if you go up to about latitude 60 degrees, 70 degrees, in summer, there's never really light saturation. The sun's very low, and it's often a little bit cloudy up there, and so the plant goes on growing all day. So that's the place where the greatest growth in plants occur. If you really want to become a market gardener, head for Alaska or the north of Russia. Those of you who have been up there during the summer, it's nearly intolerable. You wake up about 12:30 or 2 a.m. and all the kids are running around, the dogs are barking, people are clattering around, there's plenty of light, it's warm, and that goes on then until midnight next day. And you sort of end up like a limp rag, you know. Stop all this daylight. The kids just keep moving, and so do the bloody dogs. And, you know, you can barricade your door and keep them out, but they still make a lot of noise. So light saturation doesn't occur in subarctic areas. And if you have very good soil, and mostly you do because you have glacial outwash, then you have huge production and big vegetables. We were looking at Geoff's table the other night. He's got a friend who corresponds from Alaska with him. He's got, you know, the cabbages, a 60-pound cabbage. That's an Alaskan freak. And along in Scotland, you've got, what's the name? Up there at 60 degrees, huh? Findhorn. And not only do they have good outwash soils and no light saturation, but they got endless pig shit from the piggery next door, several metres a week, which they cart in. Findhorn. So not only are they in the best position to grow enormous vegetables, they got free shit. So I went to visit them once, this little group, and they're talking about their fairies, and there are other things besides fairies. It's not elves, but it's something like that. They're in communication with. And that's how they get the big cabbages. And I said to them, why haven't you mentioned the pig shit? And they tried to ignore me, which is always a bad idea. So I kept asking them. And they said, well, we compost it. And I said, yeah, well, you do, but you put it on pretty thick. It was about that thick between the rows of vegetables. And then I said, I was looking up the row and I said, oh my God, look what you've done. And everybody clustered around me and they said, what? I said, there's a fairy underneath the pig shit. And there's a little transparent thing wave here, so it's got one of its little wings out, you know. It's trying to draw attention. And it was somebody, not a Findhorn person, but one, tippy-toed up the road, and they said, oh, thank God, it's just a bit of plastic. So, like, things were falling to pieces a bit for them. Because I charged everybody 67 pounds to walk around their bloody garden and tell lies. So, and they said they didn't spray, and I looked in the garden shed and there's about every spray you can use in there. Yeah, it's like weird. Oh, later on that evening I made friends with one of the artists. He does all the angels and fairies and things for him. And we were sitting there drinking rum together in front of his fire. There's a little timid knock on the door, and he goes over to the door, and there's a low conversation. He comes back. Above the fireplace is a big angel. And he lifts it down. That was his painting. And he takes it to the door, and he brings back a £100 note. And he impales it on the nail where the angel was. He said, that looks better, doesn't it? Oh, well, true story. He's still there. In Findhorn. Bugger to find out. He buys little stoves and sells it to them. And he's got all sorts of rackets running. He's one of them. They've all got rackets running. It is a racket. The whole bloody thing's a racket. But you don't invite skeptics like me. I crawled under the back fence, which is only about 2 strands of barbed wire. It's flat enough, you can get in easily. You don't think I'd pay to listen to that bullshit, do you? Not one. Now, I keep pointing out, if I could find a recipe for fairies, you could make omelettes like shrimp omelettes out of them. Then I have them in my garden, but there isn't any recipes. No, they could shoot them down with something, you know, little jets of water and convert them into omelettes. And it's worth having a fairy, but they don't do anything, you know. A little daughter who's fairyish for a while said one day when the goes, "Oh, look, a fairy." She comes around, got it. Well, if you can't eat them, what are they doing in the garden, you know? Yeah, so they're in touch with little things in these trees, they say, usually with wings. And they have messages that they carry into the trees with these little elves and things. But I think all you've got to do is speak clearly to the tree. You know, I'm going to chop you down tomorrow if you don't give me a few more apples. But messages are flying, and all sorts of interactions are going on. Now, we've got light saturation beaten if we get into a high enough latitude. And that's why Findhorn is so productive for vegetables. It's about as high a latitude as you want to get to. Go any further north and you're in the North Sea. But Alaska also just got some photos of Alaskan vegetables, and they're all enormous, like spuds are this big and cabbages like this. 18-hour days. Ground up rock. Pig shit. And a great diet of lies too. So I said to them, you guys have just found yourselves in the right place to grow veggies, that's all. Well, we can't blame you for that. Trees and light. The trees reflect light, and the amount of light reflected is called the, you measure the albedo. Thank you. The albedo. And trees have very different albedo, both for the species and for the age of the tree and for the time of year. So they have a fluctuating albedo, but generally speaking, the sort of pines and conifers are dark and have very low albedo and very high absorption of incoming light. And they absorb it and they store it. And they emit warmth long after the sun's gone. And other trees reflect the light, birches, yellow bamboo's good. And so they're very high albedo, birches, and reflect most of the light, and for about 1.5 times the height of the birches out here, you'll see early hatching of insects from the grasses and ground, and much warmer earth. It measures much warmer out here than it does outside other plants, because light's reflected. If you want a warm hut or something, you can put it there, sure, and you do get good reflected light, but I always put a pond here, so you've got double reflection. And it's much better to have this as your background, so the cold air coming from the polar region comes through these dark forests and comes out warm and bathes your little house. And if you walk any night, walk uphill to a dark tree clump, like, you know, swamp tea tree, you'll feel the warmth coming down to meet you as you get close to the trees. And it's very distinct and very pleasant. So there's 3 ways to warm your house up. Put a pond in front, double your sunlight, put bamboo at the back, treble your sunlight, and back that up with very dense, dark trees, and then warm air comes out as the cold winds blow from the polar areas. So you're in a nice place there. All sorts of phenomena show you that that's the case. There's nothing nicer than wandering around tree clumps and things. And for a reason which I haven't actually put my finger on the poleward side of dark clumps, the soil is very wet. So the tea trees, for instance, are going that way because they're setting up their own swamp. They like swamps and they create swamps. So there is a lot of climatic interaction with trees, and you can use them as heaters and reflectors. And we use light quite a lot. We rarely are light saturated in Tasmania. Sometimes we do get that way. Now this albedo is very specific to crops and the stages of crops, and they've got very clever with aerial photographs now, because scientists love that. They love remote sensing. They like sending a satellite up and flying it over the country and saying, oh look, there's a crop of marijuana. It's got the perfect albedo for marijuana. And because they don't have to leave the laboratory, and you're not dealing with real people or real things. You're just measuring physical processes. And nothing of scientists like getting further and further away from reality. And you can't get much further away than flying a satellite over. Don't get your toes dirty. Whereas kids like us, we all went to school barefoot, so we always were in contact with the ground truths. God, it's cold today. And jumping on the puddles and breaking the ice. Albedo. When you're pressing hay, as you all know, because you're all had your share of that, I suppose, leaning off your tractor seat, watching all the hay going into the press. The sun reflects off the hay. There's nothing like cut hay, it gives you a reflection. And you're looking down, and you might have your big hat on, but that doesn't help you with the sun coming up off the hay. And you get terribly sunburnt on the face. Some Japanese friends of mine, particularly the women in Japan, they put that big hat on, then they tie a silky scarf over here and leave their eyes out, but their face is guarded from reflected sun. And you get very sunburnt. In my case, my lips swell up when they're badly sunburnt. And friends make jokes at me like higher hot lips and things like that. And I was pressing hay at my sister's farm one day, and one of her husband, the bloke whose horse I stole and rode, one of her husband's female cousins, a royal young woman, and my sister took me in a corner and said, now look, I don't want any funny business with this girl, right? Me, you know, your own brother, you know. But in fact, I did kiss her and my lips split. And several places, and she got drenched with blood down here. Oh yeah, and then I took her in. My sister nearly shot me just straight away, you know. She said virginity had gone out the window, God knows what I'd done to her. She'd sent her out in clean clothes and, you know, totally pure. And what do I bring back? Blood-drenched little girl. It was my blood. It goes to show you, you know, how you can get into trouble without ever having done anything. Just God inventing albedo, you know. Stuff like that goes on farms. All the time. Yeah. So various proportions of the light are absorbed or they are reflected. It's a reflected light that carries a wavelength that decide the colour of something. So nice light green trees, because that's what they are refusing, that light green. And trees refuse most colours of the spectrum. So you get them all sorts. But if you want to get a really hot tree, you've got to have red leaves. And there are red-leaved vines and red-leaved shrubs and trees. There's a Japanese plum, very common around Melbourne, has quite red. If you take an apple hanging on a tree and you stick a probe here for temperature, and it's got a red side and a green side. The red side is just a lot hotter than the green side. Hot enough that if you put a little zinc probe in that side and a copper probe in the other side, you can run a 1.5. It runs at 1.5 volts. It's quite a good little battery. So you've got 4 apples lined up with probes in. You can run quite a nice light. It's just troublesome carrying it in your pocket while you... Too many apples. Lemons last longer as a battery. You can soon build up 12-volt batteries, lemons, 1.5 volts each. And there's no aerial as good as a green tree. So if you're going a good TV reception, go in and plug your aerial, especially what do you call that, by 2-wire aerial, into your green tree, and you've got reception like you've never had. You can't build an aerial as good as an evergreen tree. Right. Then any light left that isn't reflected and isn't absorbed is transmitted through the tree. And here there are only a few far red wavelengths left. By the time it gets through the trees, light is pretty well stripped out, except everything except far red. And that even goes into the earth. But that's fine, because that's the wavelength that really grows mushrooms. So it benefits the fungi. Or they have grown to be adapted to those wavelengths. So we can use some of the wavelengths. Some of them melt snow, like birches melt snow quite a distance. Other of it hatches insects, but here the transmitted light grows mushrooms, which is why mushrooms grow under trees a lot, I think. One of the reasons. So, but the tree also utilises manufacture. The sun the tree is a solar factory. It's manufacturing carbohydrates and stuff up there from sunlight. And a jolly good job too. And it's giving off gases, waste products really, CO2, oxygen, but more oxygen than CO2 in the presence of light. If you've ever been a botany student in a university, you've always got some tortured little plant stuck in a test tube with a light shining on it, and you're measuring the amount of gas it's given off. That's about all I remember about botany at university. Oh, we used to torture individual beans. We used to insert very tiny electrodes into them through hair-thin glass tubes and have them connected up to electrical measurements and watch the little potentials change when they grew. And you know, you'll have a whole empty laboratory and the dead centre of it is a broad bean. And in the bean are these little slender electrodes, and the rest of the apparatus clicking and whir and so on, and dials spinning around the world are all connected to the broad bean. The focus is on the bean. And we haven't actually recorded what it's thinking about, but we will. And we'll get a shock. I imagine broad beans are very rude. Broad bean is the main food of the Egyptians, as you know. I mean, like the broad bean is to the Egyptian as meat pie is to the Australian, really. And they eat it every day. And they eat it for breakfast, slightly warm. Thereafter you eat it cold. It's called fool. Fool, and then the next word, fool madame or something. Thank you. An Arab speaker backed me up. That's very seldom happens to me. Fool madame. See, so I refuse to eat it because you fart all day. You know, it's a low kind of level of existence just to eat broad beans. You'll know you're sort of nearing the end of your ecological life when all you've got to eat is broad beans. And even the Egyptians don't have a very big broad bean. They have a thing we call tick bean. We have a real broad bean, it's broad, but tick bean is quite small. And they've been eating them for a long time. The broad bean that built the pyramids. Imagine, if you like, the amount of farts produced by building one pyramid with, you know, workforce fed on broad beans. One of them blew it to pieces, really. Because in those days they couldn't afford to smoke, so there were very few naked flames. I think we should rewrite the archaeology in terms of realities. So light is happening. And there's a constant interplay between the wavelengths of light and the plants in the way. And that might give you an idea. The Japanese, late in the year, they put up little frames like this and sticks there and cover them with straw like that. And then the sun goes down, only has a few degrees, 3 or 5 degrees above the horizon. That's fine. It hits the inside of the straw there and boom. They continue growing right on into the winter with the cabbages in under that little straw reflector. And of course it snows and snow gathers on there. So you've got a highly insulated space with double sun. Pretty good, eh? I thought it was one of the neatest things I've seen. Much better than Findhorn, I thought. You could put some more straw lying flat there, see? Just improved it myself. And they have a lot of cabbages growing there in the winter, staying alive and feeling relatively warm. Japanese being rather like the Koreans, cabbage is very important to them. Second largest crop in Korea is, after rice, green onions. Now with cabbage and green onions, you're in the kimchi area, and that's much nicer than full madame. Right. It's pray to get, you know, what's the word when they reconstruct you? As a Korean, it's much nicer. So here's trees, forest, here's the wind. And it's here that we don't know a lot, but we know some things. Now the wind has a very big cargo in it. It has a real lot of things carried along in the wind. They're organic and inorganic. And there are people who go around with their plankton nets tied to the roof of their cars and collecting the live stuff, or with their plankton nets hanging in the wind. You often see, I think a lot of people in traffic, or not traffic control, in airports, essentially must be entomologists. You'll often see a plankton net near an airport. You've seen this, haven't you? I suppose every evening they empty the plankton net and see what they got. Why is she laughing? In it comes. It carries a pretty big load, tonnages, sometimes thousands of tons, into the forest. Wow, boom, boom, boom. Most of it falls out. So if we take the ground level, it does that just inside the edge of the forest, because it slows the wind down, and you need pretty active wind to lift a lot of that stuff. And immediately just drops out its load. Well, this mound here, which is all over Australia, wherever there's a little forest in the way of the wind, it's layered up with dust and insects and, you know, lots of stuff. And a lot of it. So you get this enriched edge of the forest. So these trees often get bigger, they're woodier, stronger, and they guard the rest of the forest too. Those edge trees, they are built for that. And don't cut them down. I saw a case in England where they would cut the forest edge down because they're big trees, and the whole lot behind them blew down. They're just like dominoes. It was fantastic. Whop. Down went the rest of the forest. So don't touch the edge. Edge trees are especially strong, and especially well fed and bred to hold that wind out. Well, the wind comes in here at whatever speed, and by 100 metres, there's not a lot left of the wind. It's gone. And the temperature has gone up 1 or 2 degrees centigrade. So the wind has converted, by rocking leaves and timber about, into mild amount of heat. And then it starts, if you like, to exit the forest, which it would do. In 1,000 metres, there's absolutely no trace of this air that came on the wind. Forest swallowed it and it didn't spit it out. Foresters don't know any of these things. They do know a bit about wood, but not too much, but they know bugger all about trees. Not many people know much about trees. So you probably learn one or two things today. Okay, in comes the wind, roughs this load, 40% of it goes over, 60% of it goes in, and all the load drops out there. So cleared and slightly warmer air continues on into the forest. It's very interesting to get into the forest and study the air within the forest. I used to do this quite a bit once. I used to go right in there and sit down and have a ciggy. And as smoke went, that's why I smoked. And as the smoke went up in what should be still air, it did little things, you know. It moved in response to air movement. One day I'm sitting right inside a forest, northern New South Wales, it's a rainforest, and there was a large fern-like, well, you know, frond, maybe 8 feet long, and it's going up and down like this. And we're right inside the forest, and I looked, I tippy-toed up to it and looked for the python that was hanging on to it, or the elephant that was pulling it about. It was a big, strong frond, and there wasn't any. So in, you know, I lit my cigarette and walked right around it, and there was a faint breeze coming. This is a great big frond, like that, quite strong there. And there was a very faint breeze blowing on it, and it was depressing it, so down it went. And then this is a very strong spring, and that wasn't much of a breeze, so I brought it back up, and the breeze put it down, and it brought itself back up, and you couldn't stop it. I had my hand on there. I thought, oh, I've got a new sort of windmill. Wow, I thought, I just have to breathe on it. And here's your pump, see? There's your pump handle. So you're pumping water, but I don't know where you're pumping it from, or pumping it to. But I thought, at least this is a pretty good thing. Make it out of stainless steel or something, stainless steel frond. And you could use it for swatting fairies, all sorts of things, when you think about it. And it's not to say that that isn't what's happening. Maybe it is swatting fairies. Maybe that's why that plant invented that. So it's very interesting, actually, to get inside the forest and see what's left and what's happening to what's left. And right, 40% over, 60% in, comes to a dead stop. And the trees in between the edge and for 100 metres in are definitely thicker and heavier and better quality of timber than the trees inside the forest. If you're flying over King Island or northwest Tasmania looking for cheese or something, you'll notice with the tea tree clumps that have large dark, that they're flowering here, the flowering is happening here, not happening here. So it's an edge flowering and an edge bearing system. Seed fall, pollen, everything It's sort of edge effect. And I guess that has to be a light effect, but it's very marked from the air. When trees get adapted to us living inside, then the flowering pattern they take up is called coliferous, from the root word there is cauliflower, and they cease to flower on the crown, and they put the flowers out from the bark. So a lot of rainforest trees are coliferous. Cocoa is one. The buds come straight out of the bark, but there are lots of them. So inside the forest, it's no advantage to flower on the crown, so perhaps it's best to show the flowers out of the bark. There's a nice Brazilian fruit, coliferous. Do you know that? What's that black fruit that comes out of the bark? Jaboticaba. I used to grow them. I love them. And the flowers are very attractive to bees on the jaboticaba, and they're in the forest working the branches and trunks of the trees. Jaboticaba. You want to grow a plant like that because it sounds good. So what you do, I grow jaboticaba. It's like saying I grow giraffes or something, isn't it? And I have a herd of giraffes. Maya, you lead an exotic life. Yeah. And trees are affected by wind. So when you go to the coasts and you put in big trees or something, the wind will bend them. And the degree to which they're bent and pruned gives you a very accurate reading of the speed of the wind, average speed of the wind. And lucky for you, I captured it all and put it down. I walk it around my little anemometer looking at the bended trees, and you can judge within a few miles per hour or centimetres or metres a second how fast the wind is that is pruning these trees or throwing them down. And near the brow of the hill here, trees actually travel along the ground. Really get their heads up. If you watch hang gliders jumping off the brow of hills, which you see all over Tasmania, most of them, if you take a right angle to the angle here, to the slope here, here they are, the blokes and the hang gliders are up here. They're not here and they're not here. They're sitting on that energy wave. As we speak, I suppose, there's blokes up there. God knows why, I suppose, gets them away from the kitchen. Nobody there yelling, why don't you do the washing up, I suppose. And if they were, you know, the wind would carry their voice away. A moment of peace. There's blokes all over the world getting a moment of peace. You know, going down little one-man submarines and hanging in the air. It's desperate for a moment of peace. I think of these things sometimes, you know, I think, what are they all doing this for? Right. In goes the wind, over goes the wind, the air heats up and starts to rise, and if you sometimes come out over a hill in your car and you're looking out over a forest, you'll see steamy smoke signals rising out of the forest here and there. You've seen that, haven't you? You sit there and, what? Who's in that forest lighting all those little fires? You think, well, they're roughly 1.5 miles apart on a rough hexagon. Little steamy exits, you know. And it's hot air escaping from the forest, and with it quite a lot of water coming out as a steam. And the hot air is cooler air from the wind. Now, as this 40% goes over the forest, it causes considerable roughening in the canopy, and it picks up a different load. So now the air loads up again, and what it loads up with now is purely organic particles. It loads up in particular with colonies of bacteria off the leaf, and in particular with a bacteria which has lots of little spikes on, lives together on most leaves of most plants. I pride myself that I can sometimes spell it. Pseudomonas. Pseudomonas what? Ah. Those bacteria have little spikes on them which actually instigate the formation of ice crystals. So at the core of most ice crystals is a little Pseudomonas bacterium. And ice is a necessary precursor to rain. So the wind gets charged up with rain nuclei off the top of the forest, and on it goes, and downstream from these forests and these winds you will see a higher frequency of rain, and particularly from tea plantations. Tea's very rich in these sort of bacteria, and with these hundreds of little women with bare feet trotting around with baskets on their back, picking the tips and putting it in, they're stirring things up, and you get thunderstorms, lightning and rain downwind from tea plantations. So mainly due to the extra positive charge in the airstream. See, so what happened was all the inorganic stuff was left here at the edge of the forest in this mound. So that was the load that the wind dropped, and that is the load that the wind picked up. Pretty smart wind, don't you think? Got pollen, got bacteria, it's got an organic load, and off it goes again, recharged, cleaned up and reloaded. So forests encourage the further nucleation of ice and rain downwind of them, because they have all the right bacteria to do that. The Americans, who above all are not very bright, took that bacterium and bombarded it until it produced a dead smooth coat. So they took all the spikes away. So Pseudomonas syringae americanus is shaped like that. It's a little sphere. And that won't create ice conditions, even in moist and quite freezing conditions. And that means that in California, where they spray it all over the strawberry crops, there is no frost.
So by spraying chemicals over crops, it takes away...
Bacterial cultures, which are a form of bacteria that has lost its ability to create ice. And that was the first first organism which was genetically altered, released in the wild, in the world. What do you risk by releasing smooth Pseudomonas? Yeah. You could stop rain, it may never rain again. We just need more of it, more Pseudomonas. And of course we get more because every year they spray it on the bloody strawberries. It's like taking away the Van Allen bill. There was actually no reason to remove the Van Allen bill. They're doing a good job up there stopping particles bombard us. But they took them away because they wanted to see if they could take them away. You can take anything away if you're silly enough to try it. So we're not talking about lightsome things here. We're talking about real stuff. If you want to become a rain dancer, you collect lots and lots of Pseudomonas and put in a jam tin and go to a little hill in the path of moist winds and shake it out as you dance and utter sort of Indian-like cries like, oh, 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 and you probably get a few storms downwind and get quite a good reputation. But as long as you let them think that in your jam tin you just got little magic pebbles, those little round things are not really Pseudomonas, you might get away with it. So the forest did a very interesting thing. Now, God, here's my favourite speech on American public radio. God thinks of you, and he created the sun to evaporate water from the ocean and make fleecy clouds in the sky which blow in across your land and let pure distilled water down as rain on your roofs. And you, ungrateful wretches, let it fall off your roof onto the ground and mix up with the dust and the dog shit. And in Texas, immediately I get beeped. So nobody hears the word dog shit because there's a 3-second delay on radio. So when you're obscene, they beep you. But I've overcome that because you can be obscene in America as long as you're childish. So my favourite speech on American radio now is, God is out there heating the oceans and letting the clouds rise and bring it over America and letting it rain on you, and it runs down your roof onto the ground and mixes up with the puppy poo. And, and nobody beeps you. Isn't that sickening? However, I'm priming you up. Culturally, you've got to know how to speak to get away with murder. And you've got to use baby talk in the States, because everybody's using it anyhow. And, you know, like people like, who was that terrible right-wing idiot who had himself frozen half to death? Mickey Mouse and all those people. Walt Disney. Walt Disney made a fortune out of speaking like an idiot. And, you know, he behaves like an idiot. behave. Right. Well, this isn't Walt Disney stuff. This is shockingly crude reality. The wind. Here's the ocean, full of H2O and salt. Here's the sun, evaporating particles of water off the ocean, and some salt. We know that because Tasmania, we measure the contents of our winds very carefully, and we find, alas, that we've got polluted wind coming in over the west coast. There's 1 molecule of sodium chloride for a cubic metre of water in the winds. So I'm afraid to say we have got a little bit of salt coming in our winds. 1 molecule per cubic metre of moisture. But as the wind blows from Melbourne, we've got to close all our stations down because everything goes off the gauges and everything shorts out because the amount of pollution issued by Melbourne is unmeasurable, and delicate instruments may very well smash their needles off, and in fact do. So here you are, God at work, water ascending to heaven, H2O. Now, 18. What is that? 18. Why did that O have an 18 on it? No, it is an isotope. No, it's quite innocuous, but it's heavier than normal oxygen, which is H2O16. And it really, very little H2O18 can be evaporated by the sun. The sun hasn't got enough power to get it out of the sea. So here comes a rain inland in the clouds, and if we fly through the clouds, we get H2O 16. 90% of the rain is H2O 16 coming off the sea. And then it falls on the forests. It falls on the trees. And it comes, falls on the trees, and it trickles down through the trees, and it comes out. If enough of it comes, more than 10 mil, some of it comes out the bottom of the tree, and you can catch that and have a look at that. And that's not water anymore, really. It's as much water as your bath water. This is tree bath water you're looking at. It's chock-a-block full of minerals, has a lot of phosphate in it. And nitrate, and has a lot of organic material in it, washed off the tree. So this water is quite good for gardens or something, but it really is very different from pure water. So if you're like my wife and like the idea of just drinking plain water, you don't take it from underneath the tree. She doesn't want to grow up with lots of phosphate and that stuff. And, you know, it's got a lot of minerals in it too. So it takes about 11 millimetres of rain to get this throughfall. Until you do get 11 millimetres of rain, the tree stops all of it. It catches it on its leaves, spreads it across the surface of the leaves, and hangs onto it with ferocious determination. So the tree actually totally intercepts light rains, as you well know, because thousands of times you've been speeding on a highway in your little car and come to a tree overhanging the road in a dead dry patch of road. Funny the way it never rains underneath trees till the rain's fairly heavy. That's a fairly heavy, protracted rain in one fall. So up to that point, the trees stop at all. That's called interception. Interception of water. Doesn't let it go. Got it all, hanging on to it. Piss off. And it absorbs that water. Now, if you're simple-minded, you think, well, if I cut the trees down, more water will fall on the ground for me. And that's what engineers said for a long time. They used to clear catchments, and then they got drought, so they thought there must be something wrong. And we'll discover later what went wrong. So it's got all the water held in the forest. You can stand and look at the forest on a mountain or something and imagine you are looking at a forest, but then all imagine that you take the forest away and leave the water that's in the forest, and what you're looking at is a lake. The forest is really a lake 3 or 4 feet deep. It goes right across the landscape, sweeps right up to the top of the mountains and so on. So the forest really is a great moderator of all climate, because it stands there full of water. Some falls through and comes down into the ground where the fungi, and there's 6 or 8 miles of fungal hyphae per square metre, gratefully receive it and hang on to it right there. And those fungal hyphae are mainly attached to the roots of trees. So once again, the trees step in to stop the water again. And eventually, with very heavy rains, some water goes on and may enter the water table out of the reach of trees. But that takes a lot of rain. And the trees are very good at hanging on to it. They've got roots full of trees, of water, and mushrooms full of water, and leaves full of water, and they let a bit squeak through the soil particles and down into the water table. Not much, often 1% to 2% of the rain. So the tree's pretty mean about rain, they catch it all. And then they've got too much water. So they transpire for another reason. What is that? Yeah, and also it is part of their metabolic function. Yeah, they pump water out. And then unlike the sun, they're not piss weak. They can really shove water out. So they get H2O16 in, and then later on, more rain, and they pump out H2O18. And at first, H2O18 is only 40% of the rainfall inland, but a little inland from there, nearly 100% of the rainfall is H2O18. It's all been through trees, all pumped out by trees. So thereafter, rain after rain after rain contains no trace of the oxygen isotopes of the sea, only those from trees. So the trees take over the function of the sea. and continue to deposit the rain. The quality of mercy is not strained. It falleth as a gentle rain from heaven upon the earth beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesses those who give and those who receive. You see where all that comes from, don't you? Who said that? Thank you. You're an illiterate lot of bastards. My friend and we were mouthing it away. We probably could have gone on for a while. In America, I used to often say to my students, I would have the first lines of 100 poems that we all know, you know, Once More Into the Breach, Dear, all the speeches and things. And I'd say, give us the next line. And mostly they couldn't. So one just trusts you a little better. Without knowing, you could be equally without resources. But this is pretty interesting damn stuff, and I think it's very mysterious stuff. And it's very, very modern stuff, and it's good. So here's the trees and the rain in intimate interaction. And the trees are doing all sorts of things. In the Canary Islands, this sounds like a children's, not just so story. In the Canary Islands, it never rains. And people can't live there because there's no rain. But on some of the islands, the native people planted a tree, a very big tree, which they call the rain tree. And we know to be a tree called Ocotea foetens. Which means it doesn't smell that good. Fetid, close. Smell rather like a shed full of cockerels. If you've ever been in a shed full of cockerels, that's fetid in there, isn't it? Right. Wet hens have a peculiar smell. It'd be too bad if we had to rely on chooks to re-evaporate rainwater. Oh my God. So Ocotea foetens is a large tree of the laurel family, and at night the sea winds come in with water in the winds, and they condense on the leaves of the ocoteas, run down and drip to the ground at the drip line. And the inhabitants, smarter than they look, have little trenches sealed that run around the drip lines of the rain trees and a pipe down to the village, and each rain tree will provide water for a village, modest village, 30 or 40 people. And that's why they're there, because in a place that never rains, you have to rely, your precipitation is all condensation. Okay? In Tasmania, of the total precipitation, condensation is 87%. So rainfall is only, what? 13% of the precipitation. Yet they give you rainfall as though they're measuring the precipitation, don't they, the bastards? So it hasn't got much of rainfall. We don't have much of rainfall either, but we've got one hell of a lot of precipitation because we've got a lot of treed mountains. And that's where we get our water from. And that's where trees get a lot of water from. If you go to California, and go up to Contra Costa or somewhere and have cups of tea with friends out in their garden under some of their redwoods or other trees, it's raining all the time from the clear sky. So it's very uncomfortable, really. So you have to shift out into the open air, away from the trees. Otherwise the condensation is pretty well continuous. So now we're beginning to understand why, if we cut the trees down, the rainfall plunges. In Tasmania, if we clear all the trees, we only have 13% of the precipitation left. So the rivers will cease to flow. On the Canary Islands, the Spaniards arrived in 1450 and they attacked the native people, the Guanche, who were European Aborigines. And who had, at some time in the past, had most of their tongues removed and had developed whistle languages, which they still use. Handy, because they speak a long way across valleys to each other. Quite specific messages are sent by whistling. And Spaniards, being, sort of Christians, said, move over and let us take over this country. And Guanche said, no. And Spaniards said, we'll send you to heaven. So they cut their heads off. And they kept them, because Spaniards are great head keepers. And so you can go into little museums up on La Palma and areas, and they're great ossuaries, and the walls are lined with shelves of 8 skulls deep, and there's thousands of them. And as the Guanche were pretty vigorous and fought back and had all sorts of dodges, what in the end they did is the Spanish cut down their own trees. So the Guanche no longer had any water, and they had to come in and ask for a cup of tea or coffee or whatever. So they defeated the Guanche by removing the water, by removing their own trees. A matter of historic fact. I think a lot of this is probably news to you, is it? Past eras, old eras. Now, the Spaniards did this in 1450, just a few years after the Chinese had mapped the whole world, 1431, wasn't it? 21. And still, as you wander around the Canary Islands and you get into the back country and you come to a nice smooth stone wall and that, you'll see a little sign written up by somebody going by, and it says, Spaniard, go home. So somebody else is still alive there, isn't it? The odd Guanche is staggering around with a lump of chalk. How many years later? 14, 15, 15, 15, 16, 1950. Well, 550 years later, there's still a bit of Guanche protesting. And if the Spaniards ever get the message and do go home, there'll be lots of Guanche come popping out of the scrub. The Guanche sort of cliff people. All sorts of tribes have different habits. If you're a little Arab and you get born, in Egypt or Jordan or somewhere, then when you grow up, 12 or 13, your daddy sends you into the desert for 40 days to straighten yourself out. And 80% of you come back again. The rest don't. And it's very, very similar to Aboriginal Australians in deserts. They do very much the same thing. So, okay, you guys are weaned. We've given you everything you ever wanted. You're 13 years old. Piss off into the desert and handle the environment you've got to grow up in or die. And of course, some die. Well, the Guanche do a different thing. The Canary Islands are surrounded by cliffs with a few rocks at the bottom and the sea. And there's a few little bits of rock sticking out of most cliffs. So the Guanche give their kids poles about this long with a little iron tip, and they say, right, jump over the cliff and hold the pole out in front of you and stick it on that little bit of rock and then slide down the pole gently and do that a few times, you'll be down the bottom. So the kids go, with their pole held out, and they land there and they dive again. Oh, missed that one. So they get squashed. And exactly the same amount end up dead as whether you send them in the desert or jump them off a cliff. But the Guanche that are left are expert cliff jumpers. And when the Spaniards got there, they would herd the Guanche up towards the cliffs, and the Guanche would go over, commit suicide. They'd all jump over the edge. And the Spaniard would report that a whole lot of them are dead somewhere down the cliffs, but of course they were alive down the cliffs and came running back up when needed and smote the Spaniards again. So cliff jumping is a Guanche specialty. There's not too many cliff jumpers about. Didn't affect the rainfall at all. So I'm diverting here. But when there's a tree on the Canary Islands, which is a pine tree, it has these sort of ascending branches. Rains strictly in a Fibonacci spiral, proper trees. And the Guanche shepherds hook up these, and with a little chisel, they carve a bowl here at where the branch joins the tree. And they have little bowls cut in most pine trees, and they hop up there with a straw and have a drink occasionally, because it's one of the few places where there is some free water. The tree condenses the water from the atmosphere, it runs it down the branches and it drips into these little wooden cups. So you can see the Guanche are quite good water harvesters. Lanzarote is another island in the Canary group where it doesn't rain, and it's shaped by the Guanche into the whole island, really. It's shaped into deep pits. That's you in your pit. And then the slopes of these pits are covered with little pea-sized gravels called pecan. I use a local name, but you've seen it on tennis courts, those red tennis courts, that's pecan. And at the apex of a pit, they'll have one grape tree or one fig tree or something. So now it doesn't rain, but the cool night air comes in, fills the pits, it condenses on the pecan and trickles through the pecan into the soil and runs down here to the bottom of the pit, and the pecan shades the soil from the sun, and the grape or the fig grows, or the citrus tree. And eventually, your guanche can stand up here and pick fruit. And the whole of the island is covered with deep pits. And when you want to plant a crop of spuds, in Tasmania you fix up a big sprinkler and irrigate them, but you can't do that on the Canaries. So you clear the ground, you put the spuds in, and then you pile pecan on them and shove off. And at night air condenses out, waters your potato, and they come up and grow as though you're irrigating them. And here you are, just so you'll appear very well informed. The process of pulling down moisture from the air by pecan is called an arenado. It's knowing things like that that endears you to Spanish waitresses. And I know whereof I speak. Cup of tea? Bloody good idea. An arenado, the process of condensing moisture when you've got rid of your trees by using pecan or anything on which moisture can condense, little piles of pebbles. Your wife, stand her out in the night and she'll drip from condensation.